everyone, my name is Suzannah. I am so sorry for our technical difficulties. For some reason, it wasn't letting us start the webinar, but all of our organizers logged back off and are logging back in, so just give us just a minute. We'll get our screens running. We have a really fantastic webinar planned for you today, super informative from an amazing panel of folks. So just give us just one more minute. Again, so sorry, and we will be recording this. We will be recording, so you'll be able to watch later. Great. We are getting our webcams up and getting our screens back up. Awesome. Great.
I'm not able to get my, I don't know what the pin is. I think it was, oh, it's right here. Thank you. Still not going.
Awesome. Well, I think I'll go ahead and get started while Suzannah is getting her screen up and running. Again, welcome to the Equity and Access in School Gardens webinar put on by the School Garden Support Organization-Network. This is our 2018 webinar series. My name is Suzannah. I'm with Whole Kids Foundation. Whole Kids Foundation is one of the members of the advisory committee for the SGSO-Network. That puts on these webinars. We could go to the next slide. I'll share a little bit about the SGSO-Network. If you've been with us before, our previous name was the National School Garden Network, and we recently, just about a couple of months ago, changed our name to be a little bit more exemplary, a little bit more just explanatory of what we are, which is a group of school garden support professionals with the goal of creating dialogue, best practices, sharing, networking among school garden support organizations. So organizations that support more than one school garden. If you are just a school garden practitioner, that doesn't mean our resources are not useful for you, but our focus will be on school garden support organizations. We started this group, it's a relatively informal but productive group of school garden support organizations. To date, we have about 1,800 people on our listserv, but it's a separate kind of networking working group that started as a result of an open session at the 2012 Farm to Cafeteria Conference. You go to the next slide, please. We have a number of resources that we seek to share, but one of them is our Google Forum. You can join either by going to the Google Forum directly and seeing all the different conversations that have been archived at www.sgsonetwork.org, or you can also join our listserv and just email out and be a recipient of all of our different emails and different questions that folks ask and learn from each other all over the country and Canada. We also, if you could go to the next slide, provide webinars. We want to bring together all of the different professionals from our network to share with each other. These are just some of the different examples of webinars that we've done just this year, and then we're developing our webinar series for next year. If you'd like to watch any of those webinars, you can see them at our website. We have recordings and videos of each of the webinars. And the next slide, we also seek to gather. We also seek to get to know each other and meet when we're at different large gatherings. So the upcoming ones, we still haven't nailed down any details, are for next year at the Children in Nature Network Summit, May 16th through 18th in Oakland, California, and then the Children and Youth Garden Symposium, July 10th through 13th in Madison, Wisconsin. So just a little bit of information, if you could go to the next slide, please, about who's registered, who's on this webinar. Again, we have about 1,800 people in our network, but specifically over 300 people registered for this webinar from all over the U.S., DC, including DC and Puerto Rico. Canada was included as well. Together, we support over 9,000 gardens, and this network is really comprised of definitely school garden support organizations, but also individual schools, districts, coalitions, and government organizations. Next slide, please. So just some housekeeping really quickly. We would love if you could ask questions. This is definitely meant to be an interactive learning opportunity. So if you go to the control panel and on your GoToWebinar screen, you'll be able to type in questions as they come up. And at the end, we'll be leaving some time and organizing those to ask of our panel. There are some handouts for you. So in the handout section, there is a PDF copy of the presentation, as well as a resource guide for you that the panelists have put together, super informative. And then also we will be recording this session. So it'll be available on our website, and also in your follow-up email, you'll receive a copy as well. So I believe with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Suzannah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Suzannah Holsenbeck, and I am here at CommonGround, which is in New Haven, Connecticut, and you'll hear more about our organization from Kendra Dossi in a little bit. And we're thrilled to present with our other presenters on this topic, equity and access in the school garden movement. You'll hear from a variety of people who are working in different capacities in this work in different places around the country. So you'll hear from Sam Ullery, who's the school garden specialist in the DC office of the state superintendent. You'll hear from Kendra Dossi here at CommonGround High School and Environmental Programs in New Haven, Connecticut. And you'll hear from Ida Sobotik, the garden manager for the Troy Children's Garden of Community Groundworks in Madison, Wisconsin. You'll hear from each presenter how their respective organization approaches issues of equity and access. And we know that you, the attendees, are across the spectrum in terms of experience with these topics. So we hope that you'll each be able to find something that you can connect to and that will inspire you in this work. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sam Ullery.
Thank you. Hi, everybody.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry, Sam.
We have a poll.
Yes, we have a poll before we hand it off to you. I apologize. So before Sam begins, we would like to know the following, so you can take a second to answer this question. Great. Okay. Yep.
Are you able to see the answers, Suzannah?
Yes. So we are, so it looks like, interestingly, closing the achievement gap is the lowest popular option for what drives us to make our school gardens more equitable and accessible. But the #1 reason is that all children should feel welcome and engaged with nutrition and health disparities and best practice for any organization coming in second. I say it's interesting that closing the achievement gap is considered the least important reason for equitable and access to be considered because Sam is actually going to delve into that a little bit more about how school gardens can help close the academic achievement gap between different racial and socioeconomic groups. So fully on board with that, I'm going to hand it off to Sam.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, everybody, for answering that poll. And thank you, Suzannah, for getting us started, and also for, to use a garden analogy, being the sun in the last couple weeks, organizing us, giving us all energy and hope. You brought us all together for this webinar, and really thank you so much for being the driving force behind it. So I am Sam Ullery. I work in Washington, D.C. I do not work for the federal government. I work for the local education office called the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. It's a very long title. And I am very fortunate to oversee and support school garden programs throughout the district. We have over 100 school garden programs and about 14,000 students and over 500 teachers that engage in school gardens and on school grounds each year. So I am very invested in school gardens, but also excited to talk about how school gardens can be provided more equitably. And so here we go. Next slide, please. I'd like to start off with a really exciting thing that some of you may know, all of you should know about the Healthy Schools Act, which is a landmark piece of legislation that was passed in 2010 and is aimed to improve the health, wellness, and nutrition of all students, all public school students in the district. So this act is pretty broad. It encompasses school gardens and farm to school, but it also includes school food, physical education, physical activity, environmental literacy, composting, and recycling. It even includes mandates for bus idling and water and air quality provisions. So it's pretty exciting stuff, and it's funded through, for all intents and purposes, a soda tax, but it's not a true soda tax. You can email me offline if you want more information about that. But we do have funding to support this work in DC. So I just want to recognize that not all states or regions are in the position that we're in to have legislation and funding. But I think some of the things that I'm going to talk about may be able to apply to what you're all doing. And so next slide, please. First, I'd like to talk about health equity as it relates to school gardens. So first, let's look at a few ways that school garden programs are promoting health equity. And I'm going to talk about specifically in DC. But just so we're all on the same page, when I talk about health equity, I'm talking about the attainment of the highest level of health for all people. Next slide, please. We're going to do a poll now. So just go ahead. It's a yes or no question. Do school garden programs in your region address health disparities? You can maybe give 30 seconds for this one since it's a yes or no. Okay, wow, that is 63% yes, 37% no. Okay, great, that's really helpful. So I want to provide, next slide please, two numbers here that are specific to DC, but probably don't differ from many of your regions, especially if you're in high density cities. So these are two startling numbers to me. The top number is the percent of children in Washington, D.C. that are at risk of overweight or obesity. So that's 33%. And this rate is among the highest in the country. But also, even more startling to me is that these rates climb to 72% when you start looking at adults living in the district. So especially 72% of adults in the district are overweight or obese in the most underserved areas. So I really wanted to share this just to highlight the fact that even though when we're talking about school gardens and health disparities among children, we know that children grow up to become adults, and when we impact students, ultimately we're impacting the next generation. Next slide, please. So I love data. Wanted to show you a map here that transposes some health disparities specific to African Americans that are impacted by wealth, education attainment, criminal justice, and health disparities. And just wanted to show the pattern there that if you're not familiar with Washington, D.C., this is pretty common where there's a line down the middle. To the east, you have one demographic and one situation, one story, and to the west, you have a different. But one thing that is very exciting and one thing I wanted to highlight is that school gardens, while there is inequity with health disparities in the district, school gardens are distributed equally. And this is very exciting, but it's also very important to me that we focus our resources towards those students that are at risk or greatly impacted by health disparities. So we're seeing an increase in school gardens in those areas that are most impacted. And I would challenge folks, and I'd be really interested in hearing for your regions, what do the health disparities look like? Take the time to maybe map it out or get some data on it. They're usually publicly available. And then look at where the school gardens are and if there's some opportunity. Next slide, please. So I want to talk about some ways. So I just talked about the health disparities and gave you a little background. Now I want to show you some ways that we're addressing these in DC. So one way that's really exciting is by the way school gardens are impacting the community that they're within. So in DC, and I know across the country, students of all ages are educating the community through school garden markets, like this one. Produce from the garden is supplemented by local farms, and it's sold to parents, school staff, and the community. So in this photo, you can see that they're selling produce, but they're also sharing recipes and cooking tips. So out with the bake sales and in with the farmers markets. Next slide, please. One of my primary tasks in my job is to fund programs through a competitive grant process. And I'm very interested currently, and I'd love to hear from folks out there offline that are working on this, on considering factors to make our competitive grants and our grants more equitable. So some of the things that I've been looking at while I'm administering school garden grants, and just a side note that the school garden grants fund staffing in the school garden programs, and we really look at schools across the district to fund. But these factors that are listed here are some of the things that we're considering in our application process. And I just wanted to put these on the slide to show folks, and maybe some of them might be surprising to you. The lights just went out in my room here, sorry. But they are things that we're looking at when we're funding grants. Next slide, please. Another really exciting program is one way that we're increasing access to community members using school gardens. So OSSI, my agency, and our Department of Parks and Recreation established a program a couple of years ago called Growing Food, Growing Communities to better connect residents to new food growing opportunities and to encourage residents to grow their own food. So you remember the slide I showed earlier with obesity rates. We know that when people grow their own food, they're more engaged, they're more likely to try new things, fruits and vegetable consumption increase. So in exchange for a space to grow over the summer in the school gardens, residents provide light maintenance in the school gardens because we know, summertime maintenance is an issue, watering, weeding. So they're doing some of that. And the goal of this initiative is to increase the amount of growing spaces in the district, especially those residents living in neighborhoods that have an opportunity to be transformed into a food oasis, places that may not have access, but there's a lot of opportunity to provide fresh fruit and vegetables in those neighborhoods, while also increasing community engagement in the school and community gardens. So my dream for this program is that it's not just a summer program, but we actually see community members using the gardening spaces during the school year, and you have an intergenerational gardening opportunity. Next slide, please. Okay, well, I'll skip through this one since only 4% of people on the call think that school gardens have an impact on closing the achievement gap. I am one of those 4%, so we are strong in my 4%, but I also am encouraged by the fact that a lot of people see the importance of engagement, and I really see those those are very interconnected. So let's look at a few ways that school garden programs are engaging students and closing the achievement gap. So just so we're on the same page here, when I talk about the achievement gap, I'm talking about the disparity in academic performance between groups of students. Okay, next slide, please. All right, it's a poll. Which factors do you think school garden programs most directly address that contribute to closing the achievement gap? So how do school gardens close the achievement gap is another way of wording that question. I have a prediction on this one. Hypothesis. Yes, my hypothesis was correct. Okay, so overwhelmingly, people agreed that increasing student engagement is the factor that school gardens can most directly impact when it comes to closing the achievement gap. Okay, let's go next slide, please. All right, so just some quick numbers here. DC, just so you know, DC has adopted the PARC test and the Next Generation Science Standards. And here are some results from the 2018 state English Language Arts ELA test on the PARC. So this is comparing scores against white Caucasian, which is the top number. So white Caucasian score is 82.1%. Black African American, the middle score, and our at-risk students, which is the bottom score. And math, this is ELA, but math scores show a similar difference. And while all of our major groups of students improved from last year, there's clearly work to be done. And I strongly believe that school gardens can have an impact on this. Next slide, please. Okay, last map. This is a really exciting study. I recommend you all to take a look at this research titled School Gardens in the City, Does Environmental Equity Help Close the Achievement Gap? And this study looked at whether students attending schools with garden programs in the district performed academically higher than students at schools without garden programs. And it also looked if school gardens play a role in reducing race and social class disparities in academic achievement. So the presence of what they found was the presence of a school garden is associated with higher test scores, but the significance of a school garden fades with the inclusion of race in students. So when they factored in race, they didn't see anything statistically significant, but they did see significance when they looked at academic achievement in school gardens. Obviously, there's a lot of other factors that go into that, but it's just some food for thought. Next slide, please. Okay. So we run a summer teacher training program over the summer it's a 4-day training, and it's perhaps the most impactful thing that we can do to support teachers so that they feel comfortable and have the resources they need to teach students outside on school grounds. So this training we do in partnership with the Washington Youth Garden, and we target pre-K through 5th grade teachers from public schools in DC. And we really focus on supporting classroom teachers and facilitating hands-on standards-aligned lessons in the school garden. And the goal of this training is to increase the amount of time that teachers are teaching standards-based hands-on lessons in the school garden and to increase student engagement. So we're really getting teachers that have garden programs currently, but maybe aren't using them as much because they don't feel comfortable. They maybe don't have the skills. They don't know where to start. We immerse them in that experience, and then we provide support to them throughout the year through coaching sessions. That's my alarm to tell me to stop talking. Okay, I'll stop. One last slide, actually. I wanted to talk about this model outdoor classroom project. So we have over 200 school campuses in Washington, D.C. Many of those are older buildings that get modernized, and many of you are probably experiencing this, but why is there a lack of investment in school gardens and outdoor classrooms or on school grounds by the facilities during modernization or during a new build? Or why are they such an afterthought? So if students are to access the school garden, then shouldn't these spaces be just as much a part of this facilities plan as a science classroom or a gym? So we went out to design and build 3 model outdoor classrooms that are meant to be spaces that teachers can easily use and maintain, and they're maintained by facilities. And the plan for these classrooms is to inspire facilities from around the country that this kind of thing is possible. School gardens and school grounds there should be an investment no matter, where you are. If they're investing in schools, then the school garden should be a part of that. I'm really excited because this particular school happens to have a pizza oven, a refrigerator, and a stove and oven top. So this school really wanted a cooking classroom, so we were able to build that outside. So thank you all so much for listening to me talk so much, and I'm going to pass it off to Kendra.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Okay, you should be able to hear me. Hi, so my name is Kendra Dossie, and I work at CommonGround. So I'm the Schoolyards Program Coordinator. Schoolyards is a program here at CommonGround, part of our community outreach programs, where we team up with 19 New Haven public schools to create outdoor learning spaces and outdoor laboratories. So that includes habitats with pollinators, but also school gardens that have vegetable gardens. Here we have, on the side, we have some information. So if you want to look at our Instagram, we always post really cool things with our students, like the activities that we've done. And we also have a website, the School Garden Resource Center. So my background in food and agriculture education started when I was a Food Corps service member. So a few of you may be familiar with Food Corps. If not, it's a nationwide AmeriCorps program that seeks to connect kids to healthy food. So I started that actually here at CommonGround, and about 3 years later, I'm a staff member, and it's been really awesome so far. So let's start talking about CommonGround. CommonGround's mission is to cultivate habits of healthy living and sustainable environmental practices within a diverse community of children, young people, adults, and families. So CommonGround, it started as it became a charter high school in 1997, and it's since grown to a 3-tiered organization, and that includes over 200 high school students, an urban farm, and many community programs where we reach out to people within and outside of New Haven. And here is our commitment to equity and access. So we have a strategic plan that focuses on 5 priority outcomes. So that includes building organizational understanding of race and racism and other forms of oppression, building equitable, inclusive systems of evaluation, accountability, and decision-making, building an integrated whole organization that breaks down silos where people understand and contribute to each other's work, building an inclusive, collaborative, liberatory social justice curriculum and pedagogy, and having students lead the change in these initiatives. So right now we have a poll, just a quick poll. Does your organization have a strategic plan or strategic priority? All right, and I'll give a few moments for people to vote. Let's see if we get like 85% of people to vote. Let's see. All right, 81. Okay. All right, so we have most people, actually about 2/3 said yes, and about 1/3 said no. All right, and now we have another quick poll. So if your organization has a strategic plan, so 2/3 of people would be answering this, it doesn't include anything about equity or access. And this poll should be starting soon. Okay, there we go. Yeah. Great. Great, and I think, yes, that's about it. So out of those who do have a strategic plan in their organization, 71% has strategic plans that include something about equity and access, 30% no. And it's really awesome to see that, so I kind of know where people are coming from as we go through this presentation. That's really great. So thank you for voting in that poll. So we're going to talk about a little bit specifically about Schoolyards, CT Schoolyards, which is a project of CommonGround. So we support the creation and effective use of school gardens, schoolyard habitats, and outdoor learning laboratories in 19 schools in New Haven, Connecticut, in addition to providing professional development statewide. So there's a lot of things going on here at CT Schoolyards. This is just one of many projects of CommonGround. And program staffing. So it's important to think about program staffing, especially in a city that has such a high amount of diversity as New Haven. So New Haven is a sanctuary city. It has a high immigrant background. There's large amounts of students who live in New Haven who are either Black or non-white Hispanic. And it helps to have someone that understands and is knowledgeable about those backgrounds when they're coming into schools and expressing desire to have a partnership with them. Another thing to keep in mind about New Haven is it's the site of many universities, the biggest well-known of those being Yale University. And there has been a big tradition in New Haven from like many, many years of outside institutions coming into the schools and kind of using them as an experiment or to try out something and not really following up with the community. So there's a lot of people in the community who feel like, oh, like if people are interested in gardening, how do we know that's not just a Yale project? Or how do we know they're going to stay for longer than a year and then not just leave without giving us any control or knowledge about the garden? There was one woman that I worked with actually about 3 years ago, and we were talking about a school garden site that was actually a shared community garden. And she said, if there's a lot of white people with clipboards in the garden, then no one's going to think the garden is for them. So thinking about staffing as a way to break down barriers that you may have with those in your community is really important. When people see me as an African-American woman coming in to their schools, they understand that there's a little bit of baseline of understanding, and they feel that I know more about the city of New Haven than like perhaps someone who is considerably older and like hasn't lived here as long. So another part of our program is job training and advocacy. So we want to cultivate diverse leaders here at CommonGround. So part of my job description is I'm the supervisor for Green Job Corps. So Green Job Corps is a job training program for CommonGround high school students that gives them the tools to advocate for their own communities, right? So what I do as part of Green Job Corps, and here's some of my career students in these photos, we go out and we maintain these gardens at the 19 New Haven sites, but I want them to make sure that it's not just, oh, you're going to fix up gardens and then we're going back home, right? I want them to understand why these gardens are important. I want them to understand like the help that they're doing for not just teachers, but also people in the community and children themselves. So I often say to them, remember how, like, I'm sure you could remember there was a time in middle school where you thought your education was kind of boring. Here's a way. So we're doing this so that teachers could get more interested and students could be more interested and have like hands-on experiences in the garden. And I also always emphasize with them, like, you are an expert of CommonGround because you've gone there for 3+ years. And teachers and other people in the community are probably going to ask you questions about CommonGround. And you should be able to speak about your own experiences and speak on behalf of yourself and advocate for yourself in this position. So, you know, I always want to emphasize that, you know, the teachers and staff at these schools shouldn't just be looking towards me for all the answers, because the students themselves are experts and knowledgeable about what goes on in their communities. And another thing is many students who are part of Green Jobs Corps during their time at CommonGround are now either employees of CommonGround itself, and others have gone on to be employed at other environmental organizations like U.S. Fish and Wildlife. And CommonGround is also a college preparatory school. So each year, more than 90% of our students are admitted into college. So there's a lot going on within the high school, and Schoolyards interacts with that. So another thing we do is work with teachers. So we want to influence equity and access to quality professional development. We run faculty meetings with teachers in New Haven. So we want teachers to set goals of outdoor learning for each unit, regardless of content or grade level. We've started doing this a little bit more recently, but there are some schools who have already made outdoor learning a priority, and we want to make sure that teachers feel comfortable and not too overwhelmed with this, right? And it's important to also consider that, again, New Haven has a high amount of Black and non-Hispanic, non-white Hispanic kids. So even being able to have teachers deliver this quality education to a mostly Black and brown populace is really important. We want to make sure that we are guiding them towards goals that are more appropriate for the populations that they are serving. And we also do a lot of co-teaching. So me, Suzannah, or another one of our coworkers, Melissa, will go into a classroom and model to teachers what it looks like to teach in outdoor learning spaces, because it is kind of a unique experience that a lot of teachers do feel uncomfortable with. And we see that there is a transformation with seeing students who may not be known as like golden children within the classroom. We see teachers be surprised that they're acting in such a positive way in an outdoor space, right? So we've seen students become way more engaged, become focused, be able to answer questions correctly, and really see that spark in their eyes after this PD. So last but not least, we are piloting a healing garden. So we're trying to pilot a therapeutic garden space for students experiencing the effects of trauma. We're starting a partnership with one school in New Haven, and we've noticed that in some schools, gardens are already used as kind of a calming or timeout space for students with behavioral issues. So this garden that we're starting with the school, and it's still very much in its beginning phases, it's not going to be a garden that will be used for entire classes for academic learning, but it will be a garden that will have some benefit to students within New Haven, especially given the information that we have now about the way that poverty could inform trauma, or even, just the fact that there's a high immigrant population. We have Iraqi, et cetera, refugees. So we're really excited about this, and we'll definitely talk more about this once we have more detail. All right, and that is it for me. Thank you so much, everyone, and let's hear it for Ida Sobotik.
All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Ida, and I am the Troy Kids Garden Manager in Madison, Wisconsin with Community Groundworks. And we also partner with the Wisconsin School Gardens Network. So I won't really be talking so much about the Wisconsin Schools Garden Network, but here on the side, these links, I really recommend you checking them out as resources. They are specifically designed for teachers and educators who are working in school gardens, whether or not you're living in Wisconsin. So those are some really great resources that you can check out. All right, let's get started. So the next slide. Okay, you can go on to the next slide too, Suzannah. So I've outlined here a couple of principles that I believe were really key to the foundation of Troy Kids Garden, and especially in its inclusion in access and equity. So if you go to the next slide, we're going to do a poll. And if you could select one or more of which of these principles speaks to you. We have partnering with organizations that provide low or no cost programs, having signs in other languages that reflect those who visit, growing foods from all cultures, cooking recipes from students or families that are using your garden, and teaching skills that students can apply to their own lives. Wow. I feel, yeah, this is some really strong data with a lot of most emphasis in teaching skills that students can apply in their own lives. Great, this is great information. All right, so we can continue to the first principal. So I'll just talk briefly about how the Kids Garden is structured and how I think it's really foundational in how accessible it is to the students that we serve. Troy Kids Garden partners with community organizations that are local and very near our garden. And we have collaborated with already existing youth programs that offer all like low cost and no cost youth programs. And they've been coming to our garden since the co-creation of it. And as we maintain those relationships, we offer scholarships to those organizations who need financial assistance. And in my time at Troy Kids Garden, I've seen a lot broader accessibility with the students who come more and more versus the one-time, one-and-done visit field trips. So that can be a really important role. All right, so the next slide. Being intentional about where you place your garden is important too. And I know a lot of us don't have very much of a say about the structure and design of where our gardens are placed. But I think it does have an impact on how accessible your space is. The Kids Garden is located in a grove of 300 community gardens. It's on a bus line in Madison. It's in a mixed income, racially diverse neighborhood, and it's within walking distance of elementary schools and community centers. There are multiple entrances into the garden. There's no walls. You can come into the space from any direction, and it's wheelchair accessible. So many different people can come into the space easily. And because it's in a grove of community gardens, there is an intergenerational aspect. The kids in the garden will see families working and growing the same foods, and it offers this level of welcomeness. And it's a place where kids may or may not have connections. And so the land itself is multi-layered. So I just wanted to include this because it is important to make sure that if we're advocates for accessibility and equity, that we provide sustainable programs for our youth, that they're not just a 1 or 2 year program. And so developing and maintaining relationships with funders is unfortunately very important. And I've included a couple of tips in the notes. The most important of which is documenting photos, quotes, and stories daily to use when you're applying for grants. Can you use the next slide? So some of us, the lowest amount said that having signs in other languages that reflect are important, but still 63%. I'm going to talk about another aspect of how the power of signs can really influence how welcome people into your garden. So at Troy, we have this like little whoop whoop circle at the end of our programming where we all gather after we've experienced our time in the garden, and the kids can share. It's like a shout out. The kids can share an act of kindness that they saw someone else do, an act of bravery, or trying something new that they saw someone do. They can share something they're grateful for, and then everyone chants whoop whoop, and then somebody else can share. So one time a boy said whoop whoop to Troy Kids Garden because Black Lives Matter, and he pointed to this sign that I have in the picture here, and there was an astounding whoop whoop afterwards, and it was as if every person in the space had chimed in and like agreed with them, and it was just a really powerful moment. We all got chills that just a sign that's kind of passive can have a really powerful impact on making people feel welcome and included. Yeah, and then the sign on the left here is, these are names of community organizations that we've been serving for a long time. So Kennedy Heights, Spirit Court, Goodman, Northport. The Salvation Army is one, and it's angled so the camera can't quite see it. But there was one time where I was having a conversation with a boy who I knew was homeless and living at the Salvation Army. And he saw this Salvation Army painted on the sign, and he said, "Hey, Salvation Army, I live there." And you could see like this emotionally transformation happen in him. because it was like the Salvation Army was famous because it was painted on a sign at the Troy Kids Garden. And you could see he stood a little bit taller, and he developed this deeper sense of ownership for where he lived and for what he was doing in our place. And so I think that signs can have a really powerful sort of indirect way of making the kids that we serve feel welcome and included. And that's all a part of making your garden more accessible. So one other thing I want to include on the note of signage, that might seem obvious, but we want to be careful about our language. So we don't want to point out or write things such as, we're here to help the handicapped and the unfortunate. That's not creating a space of safety, and we want to avoid deficit framing when we're trying to build a more equitable and accessible space. So just a friendly reminder about that. You can go to the next slide. So teaching knowledge and skills that your students can apply to their own lives was one of what I think is really, really important in providing an accessible and meaningful program. And I think, yes, with the poll, a lot of us agree to that statement. So we have another story to share about how your garden can really influence us. So it was one of the last days of the summer programming, and we had our middle school garden fit class decide what they wanted to cook on their last day's feast. And one boy excitedly exclaimed, "Ooh, let's make kale chips. I made kale chips with my mama at home last night." And so he took the lead in gathering his friends and harvesting the kale and preparing it and cooking it in the sun oven. And then this boy was ultimately the one that decided he wanted to serve the kale chips to everybody at the end, potluck style. So when it comes down to it, to teach skills like this, that they can really empower youth, and that's what this kind of work is all about. Next slide. And to finally send home kids with food as often as you can. It's pretty self-explanatory, but this offers a safe way for kids who want to take home extra food that's fresh and organic and healthy, that they can, and they will appreciate way more than we know. Okay, so next slide. So I have some other points about building an inclusive garden community. And I do want to be conscious of the time and opening it up for questions. I know we started a little bit late, so I'm going to, just on the note of time, I'm going to just breeze through these, and we'll open up for questions. But one thing that I've noticed in many school gardens is that it can be almost exclusive, and that kids or teachers won't want to go into a garden because maybe it's only Mr. So-and-so's class, or maybe it's only the 6th grade can go in. But if we can model and promote a really positive community, that can be a total game changer. So the next slide. So let's see, just a story about how gardens can be a huge factor and an amazing place to equalize things, because no one has ownership over a garden, is that there's one community group that comes to Troy, and we've observed that when they come into our space, they are they self-segregate. So the white kids are walking in, talking with each other, and then the African-American kids are coming in, talking with each other. And we get in a big circle and we play some community building games, and they go do the stations and activities. We do our whoop whoop circle and eat a snack, and then they're off. And we've observed that the difference is when they're walking away, they're commingling, at a subconscious level, like they forget about who's who, and they're just sharing with each other what the silly chicken did, or what they harvested, or the different things that happened in the garden that day, where they ended up feeding, if they found a bug to feed the chicken, or who knows what. They're co-mingling, and there's laughter. So just 1 hour in a garden can be a really powerful opportunity for equalizing things, even at a subconscious level for young children, and providing authentic relationships to form. All right, and then the next couple of slides here are more about instructional strategies and things that you can do, concrete things that you can do in your garden space that are not just about growing vegetables, but are also expanding your outdoor area into places where, and offering activities that kids can come into your space from multiple angles. If they're interested in music, if they're interested in like looking through the magnifying glass at bugs, if they're interested in running around and catching butterflies, all sorts of different things. So I won't go into detail for the sake of time, but if we go to the next slide, there's just a couple of examples of children at work with, connecting into the garden space and having really great discovery moments through these different access points of learning. And so if you go to the next slide, I ran into these play themes that David Sobel wrote about in his book, Design Principles for Educators. And I realized that as I was preparing for this webinar that my staff at Troy, we offer activities in all 7 of these themes. And this is what David Sobel is saying, that children naturally end up doing anyway when they play outside. And so there might be a correlation between engagement and how we can harness student engagement outdoors, and how we can use that to our advantage to make our spaces more accessible. So the next slide is just an example of students dressing up as a tool to enter the garden. Our gardening station became so much more popular once we got once we brought in dress ups, and so this would fall under theme 2, descending into fantasies and engaging in imagination. And then the next slide just offers a whole bunch of other learning entry points in an educational garden that you can look at in the handout and I would, apply to your own school gardens. So that is all I have for you. We'll end on a note of inspiration from Maya Angelou, and we can bring it into questions.
I guess we have time. There's a lot of great questions that are going. We're trying our best to answer them. If we can't answer them, if we didn't answer them, we'll definitely get back to you in the coming days. But we have 1 minute left, so I'll just throw one. There's so many good questions. I don't even know where to start. There's been a lot of questions around well, let me just ask the question. How does an organization, I think this is for CommonGround, how does an organization with a largely white staff that exists in a primarily non-white neighborhood and seeks to serve primarily non-white clients recruit and engage people of color, specifically around providing employment opportunities?
All right, that's a great question. And I think that's been something that people at CommonGround have been wondering. That's actually been part of our strategic plan towards equity and access. We have recently seen an increase in people who are people of color who are on staff, especially in the past, I would say actually since I've joined. But I mean, the reality is a lot of people at CommonGround who are especially in management are white. I think going in, I think that's not something that you could avoid at mentioning, or that's not something that like people in the community are going to not notice, and I think one thing that I've seen a lot of my coworkers at CommonGround do that's really good is coming in with like going to community members and saying like, hi, I know that you know more about this area of your world or like area of your life than I do, and I want us to work together to find a way that we could, help all of us, and not just doing it in a way where it seems like oh, we're helping you sort of relationship. Other things I think really help out CommonGround is I've noticed a lot of my coworkers do live in New Haven. I live in New Haven myself, and that gives us a chance to see people who live in the community outside of work. And that also gives the feeling that it's not just a client versus and clientele kind of relationship, and that it's a little bit more of an earnest relationship, because it is, and that we are trying to work together to think about ways to better New Haven, which is a place where we all live. I know I talked a lot. Sorry about that.
That's great. I think that's all we have time for questions. Tristana, do you want to close us out? Thank you, Kendra.
No problem.
Sure. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank you to all of our panelists for all of the information you shared. We definitely recognize that this is a very nuanced and layered and important topic, and it's incredibly hard to even begin to tackle within 1 hour. But we hope that you got just a slice of information and inspiration from these 3 different organizations and 4 different individuals, and just kind of started an opportunity or continued some deepening of learning. So thank you all so much for joining us. Like Sam said, if we didn't get to your question, we will follow up later. We do have a record of all of your questions, and we hope you continue to engage with the SGSO network. Thank you all. Have a good day.
Thank you.